In today's show, the Blazers hire 2 new assistants as Chauncey Billups' coaching staff is almost full again. Who are these dudes and why does it matter? Welcome to Locked On Blazers. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Trailblazers, your daily Portland Trailblazers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, world? It's your past first point guard and Trailblazers reporter, Mike Richmond. You are listening to another episode of Locked On Blazers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, available wherever you get podcasts and also on YouTube. Thanks for making this show your first listen, coming at you each and every weekday, Monday through Friday, so make it a part of your daily routine. Make your first listen and tell your friends to do the same. It's Locked On Blazers, your team every day. Today's episode is a little bit late. Your boy was on vacation. I'm back. Spent some time in the beautiful city of Denver, Colorado. Saw my beloved Colorado Rockies, that is, losing the ninth inning to the Washington Nationals. I'm rejuvenated, refilled by watching a baseball team that I enjoy blow it in the ninth inning, and I'm back to bring you 5 episodes this week. Today's episode, this Monday, June 24th show, is going to come out a little bit late, probably 9:30 p.m.-ish on the West Coast, so Tuesday if you're on the East Coast, and if you're somewhere in the middle of that, and if you're in another place, you'll know what time it is. You'll figure it out. But we're still going to have 5 shows this week. It's what we do. Today, we're going to talk all about the Blazers' new assistant coaching hires. They added 2 veteran assistants to the staff, Nate Bjorkgren and Chris Fleming. I want to talk about those additions. Just give you a quick bio of who those guys are and kind of the additions to the staff, and then talk maybe some big picture stuff about what this means. Because I think, this is meaningful because so what's next? This is still such a lame duck season for Chauncey Billups that the staff might matter in the coming months. It'll matter, but it might matter in a very specific way in the coming months. That's what we will do in today's show. And then on Tuesday's show, we're talking all things draft rumors. I'm literally going to record it right after this one. So stick with me. You're still going to get 5 shows this week. Let's get into it with assistant coaching talk. Here's the thing. Before we get into the bios of these guys, the Blazers hired Nate Bjorkgren, who's worked in the league a long time and most recently for the Indiana Pacers. Actually, he spent last year, and the Blazers in their press release said that Bjorkgren spent last year as a, quote, special assistant to the coaching staff for the Portland Trail Blazers. And Chris Fleming is coming off of Billy Donovan's staff with the Chicago Bulls. But the big picture is probably more important than the specifics here. I'm going to get you into the specifics. That's what we do here. It's kind of what the nature of a daily podcast about your Portland Trail Blazers. We are going to get into the weeds a little bit, but the big picture is important. This is important. The Blazers added 2 seasoned NBA assistants to the roster, including one with head coaching experience. If you're going to make this move, Steve Hetzel, long-term NBA assistant, and Scotty Brooks, who's been a head coach in a couple different spots, and a long-term NBA guy. Like if you're gonna move off of those gentlemen, and Hetzel left of his own accord to get the lead assistant job in Brooklyn, and Scott Brooks was not renewed and not brought back. The Blazers had 3 coaching vacancies heading into this summer: Brooks's job, Hetzel's job, and then the Blazers did not renew a behind-the-bench job for Rodney Billups, Chauncey Billups' little brother. And politics aside of not renewing the coach's little brother, right? That's its own thing that we've discussed on the show. And the cliff notes of that is, yeah, it's notable. Yes, that is a notable thing that happens. But if you're going to hire, these are obviously the front of the bench jobs, right? That you don't hire these people with the resumes that Bjorkgren and Fleming have, and they're not behind the bench jobs. The behind the bench job they haven't hired yet, they could do a couple different things there. One, they could hire some sort of video guy, scout guy, player development guy that we've never heard of. 2, they could promote from within, promote one of their folks that's on the video staff or on the player dev staff that doesn't sit on the bench during games. It doesn't have an assistant coaching title. Promote there and then hire behind. I think that's fairly likely what they do based on the timing of these hires. I would assume that's what they do, but they could do whatever. They can do whatever. they have carte blanche to do whatever. And it was reported by Sean Highkin of Rose Garden Report months ago that the Blazers were going to hire all 3 roles. I have reason to believe they still will do that. But when Hetzel and Brooks leave, adding veteran assistants is incredibly important. I think the other thing that's incredibly important is kind of addressing some of the weaknesses on the staff. I think the weaknesses on Billups' staff has been lack of creativity on offense, and some of it is just talent, right? How creative can you be with the talent? But and being able to instill hey, this is how we want to play, like a true concept and an identity. And you're getting creativity, at least in theory, and some offensive acumen in theory with both these hires. Bjorkgren has served in player dev roles and was the head coach of the Pacers. He worked for Nick Nurse for a long time. Chris Fleming was the assistant for Kenny Atkinson, in charge of the offense for the Brooklyn Nets. In the previous decade of the teens of the 21st century, and then was a lead assistant in Chicago. Like this is experience and offensive acumen, and guys who have been charged with running NBA offenses in the past. You've got experiences with player dev stuff, like just working with young players. Fleming reportedly he worked very closely with Kobe White. He was the assistant coach, assigned to Kobe White in his career. And what did Kobe White do other than like push towards MIP, right? Like he was really stinking good. And it took him a while to get there, right? But like player development's not linear. It's having good coaches matters because the natural sort of things being non-linear. And then like a new take on X's and O's, because I think the Blazers, I think sometimes they run too much offense and sometimes they don't run enough offense. Like, and by too much, I mean, it's like they go to the sidelines, you get a call from the sidelines, take a little while to get into it. Okay, it doesn't work. Okay, now it's bogged down. And it's like you'd almost better off just letting freestyle. And then sometimes they freestyle too much when like structure would help. And getting, coaches with NBA experience and all of those things can probably help get you a little structure, or the balance between when you need structure and when you kind of need to flow, and that rhythm of things. And guys who've coached in the league for a long, long, long time, getting that in the building matters. And then that's really what it comes down to here. The biggest value of adding new assistant coaches is fresh voices. Fresh voices. You're not going to change probably the deep outcome of the team, even if the Blazers like run it back, right? Even if I really hope they don't, but even if they largely run it back and this like looks like the same roster and they just bank on a little bit of health, they're probably like, they're just like not good enough they would have to they finished last in the West. They'd have to leapfrog 5 teams to make the play-in. That seems like a lot, right? They're going to be better than 5 other teams in the West next year that finished ahead of them, and one of those teams, Memphis, is going to like get all-stars back. It just seems unlikely that they're going to be like even a play-in team, even at full health. Love to be wrong. Be better for the podcast. So what you're doing is you're kind of building a foundation. You're building a foundation with purpose. You're building a foundation with a vision, and you're building a foundation with fresh voices that can help you reach whatever's next. Knowing that you're probably going to be bad next year, knowing that you're building towards a thing that is several seasons away, getting the right voices in the building to deliver that message, deliver the plan. I've talked about this in the past. It's like you need a good plan. You need a good execution of that plan, and then you need players capable of executing that plan well. You need the last part, the players, is a much larger part than the first part. But if you don't have a good plan and you don't get the buy-in to execute that plan, then you're cooked anyways. So getting some fresh voices maybe to help both change the vision and relay that vision could be useful. So who are these dudes? Let's talk about who Nate Bjorkgren is, and then we'll talk Chris Fleming to close the show. But let's talk Bjorkgren in the second segment, because I only know one thing about him, and it's not good. Let's talk about it in the second segment. Join me there, won't you? First, though, I want to tell you that today's show is brought to you by eBay Motors. There's 3 words you need to know with eBay Motors: passion, drive, and patience. It's the formula for winning championships. It's also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, whether that's superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, whether you're into power, whether you're into style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts to choose from for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or your money back, because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, baby, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. All right. Let's talk Nate Bjorkgren. I mentioned that I only know one thing about him and isn't good. Here's what I know about him. He was the head coach of the Indiana Pacers, and he got fired because nobody liked him. When I knew the name, when the name came up, this is what I knew about him. One thing I pride myself on the show is that I don't fake the funk. Sometimes I have to do research about things that I don't know about and have to become sort of a low information expert for a brief period, but I don't fake the funk. I'll never pretend to know something I don't, and I'll never pretend to be an expert on something I'm not. I don't know. I don't have a deep index of NBA. I do not have a deep index of NBA coaches, but I have a pretty good memory of coaches in the league, and I have a pretty good memory of like big stories. And a big story was that when Nate Bjorkgren got fired after 1 year as a head coach of the Indiana Pacers, a lot of reporting came out that people didn't like him. In fact, here's the reporting from Jake Fisher's story from May of 2021. Bjorkgren's communication style has been categorized as aggressive and abrasive with players and members of the Pacers staff, from front of the bench assistants down to trainers and equipment personnel. That behavior was cited as the cause for one of his assistant coaches' resignation. That's from a much longer story from May of 2021 about Nate Bjorkgren losing his job in Indiana. Let's just get this out here real quick. Folks grow up. People change. Coaches improve. Coaches get better. Jason Kidd is a much better coach now than he was when he started. He's a perfect sort of prime example of it. And just coaches get better. Like the way players get better, coaches get better, and people mature. People change. You got people in your life who've changed and matured, even into the late 30s and 40s. Like it happens, right? And perhaps even some sort of public embarrassment could cause you to change as well. But that's what I know about Nate Bjorkgren, right? That's what I know. I knew that story. I was like, when a friend of mine asked me about Nate Bjorkgren, when his name's kind of floating around, it's like, hey, the Blazers are going to hire this guy. I said, isn't he the guy who got fired? And we kind of text back and forth, and I sent him this article from Yahoo Sports from May of 2021. I said, yeah, it doesn't look good. Yeah, like this is not the thing you want when you're hiring a coach. This is not kind of like the story that you want to read. But folks change. Let's go to Bjorkgren's resume a little bit, because his story, the biggest part of his story is always going to be that until he writes the next part. But he's more to it than that, and he's someone who's coached in professional basketball in North America for a long time. He started with 8 years in the D League, got hired on the Iowa Energy staff in 2007 to be an assistant for Nick Nurse with the Iowa Energy. Bjorkgren is from Iowa. His dad's a coach there at a college in Iowa. And this is Midwestern basketball at its finest. Getting a D League job, now G League, then D League job in 2007 with the Iowa Energy, and then he spent eight years in the D. He was a head coach in the D League from 2011 to 2015, and then got hired by the Phoenix Suns as sort of in a player dev role on Jeff Hornacek's staff. This is like the really messy era of the Suns. This is a messy era of the Suns. He gets hired on Jeff Hornacek's staff. Jeff Hornacek's a terrible basketball coach. He gets fired. They hire Earl Watson, and Bjorkgren gets to stay over, right? And that is, to me, that's telling, right? It's like this dude is useful enough that you'd want him on your staff. And as we reshuffle, this is like players we want. And then Earl Watson had some members of his staff get fired after his early stint in Phoenix, and Bjorkgren again stayed over. But he eventually leaves from 2015 to 2017. He's member of two coaches that were not at all successful in Phoenix before things got good. With Phoenix. And then he joins Nick Nurse in the 2018-19 season when Nurse gets hired by the Raptors and they win the freaking championship. And Bjorkgren is on Nurse's staff when they win the title, and they win the title by being incredibly creative and playing a box and one in the NBA finals and playing a bunch of weird shifty zone and inverting things on offense with shooters, big shooters like Serge Ibaka and Marc Gasol, and like and using Siakam and Kawhi Leonard in interesting ways. Like they're a creative team on offense and on defense. They're a team that thinks outside the box. They're a team that like truly experiments, and Bjorkgren is on Nurse's staff. And he's on that staff he's on the 2018-19 season. He's on the 1920 season. That's the weird COVID year in the bubble. But like then he gets hired off of that to coach the Pacers in the season that started in December. And he coached one season he's the head coach. This is his first head coaching gig, coaches one season in Indiana. They'd gone to the bubble and lost, fired Nate McMillan. Like, okay, we're a playoff level team, but we need to be better. And they finished 34-38 in that 72 game season that started in December. And then they lose to the Wizards in the play-in. And then it all comes out that Bjorkgren is like, not cool. that he's just like not like the story, and the reporting from Fisher of Yahoo Sports is the most incisive reporting. But I would say that Adrian Wojnarowski around the same time at ESPN wrote a story about like how Bjorkgren was abrasive and didn't get along with players and had rough relationships with things. But like it was everyone described it as tumultuous. This is a dude who yelled a lot. I think that's like the real thing to know is like he's someone who's kind of characterized as a micromanager and a yeller, and someone who both micromanages and yells is just like it's hard in the NBA. One of the hardest things in the NBA is that your players can play like crap, and because you play a game the next less than 24 hours, but even like you play 2 more games the rest of the week and you've got to travel, you just can't yell. You can't yell every night. You've got to pick your spots because your voice it's too much. Like it's too much. If they hear the same yelling, the same complaining, the same intensity, you really have to learn to pick your spots. There is a soft magic with head coaching in the NBA that's kind of unknowable from the outside, right? But like, I've been around the league enough and talked to enough NBA guys. It's like, nobody likes yellers. I think for the most part, from what I understand, Chauncey Billups, not a yeller, not someone who screams. Raises his voice, makes his point clear, but not a screamer, right? By any means. From everything I've heard from folks who have witnessed his coaching style up close and behind closed doors. But like not yelling, there's a subtle magic to when to yell, right? Like it's also those type of things. But so Bjorkgren has this rough stint in Indiana. Gets fired is the big news. It's what I know about him. He goes back and gets hired right back onto Nick Nurse's staff, right? Nurse is like, this dude has been coaching with me since 2007. I trust his basketball acumen. Welcome back to the Raptors staff. He coaches for the next 2 seasons back as an assistant in Toronto with Nurse until Nurse gets fired or they move on from him. I think he got fired. I think he had time left in his contract, but moved until he moves to Philly. And Bjorkgren doesn't travel to Philadelphia, doesn't get the job with Nurse in Philly, and he ends up getting the special assistant gig with the Blazers. What Bjorkgren was hired to do was to have that Nick Nurse specialty, right? Is to have the creativity, is that really creative defenses and the offenses that have take and break some principles. And Nick Nurse's offenses weren't like amazing. Like the thing that he's really is the experimenting on defense, but like. What I remember from the Indiana team is like them running a triangle and 2 at some point that the players looked like they had about 60% interest in running, right? And I think coaches can change and coaches can improve and people can change and people can improve. I will say that on first blush, if you're a Blazer fan, you just hope that this is a thing of the past, and also like being in the first chair as the lead guy, as the head coach, is very, very, very different from being an assistant coach. It's a very, very different role in how you interact with, you have basically no media interaction, none. But how you how you're asked to interact with players, how you're asked to interact with staff, it's just different, right? It's different. The ask is different of you. You're not the face. You're not a CEO. You're not it's a very different thing. So maybe this will suit Bjorkgren better. Maybe this will suit his personality better, and maybe the things that why he was hired in Indiana, the creativity, and the guy who's spent a ton of time in those in the player dev world, the player development world of the G League or the D League at the time. Like maybe you're getting that, right? Maybe you're getting a guy who worked in player development for 8 years in the D League, worked in player development in Phoenix, a guy who's been on creative coaching staffs in Toronto. And just didn't work out as a head coach. Maybe you're getting that guy to be an assistant, and you're getting that basketball acumen. The other thing to know is that in that reporting from Jake Fisher is that Kevin Pritchard was the guy who running the Pacers at the time, who hired Bjorkgren, and they apparently have a close relationship and go way back. Chad Buchanan, the GM of the Pacers, who also was a big proponent of Bjorkgren, and both of them discussed a lot with Nick Nurse before the Bjorkgren hiring about what he would bring to the table, and they were both big fans of Bjorkgren. They were both big supporters of him, and that's the reporting from that story in 2021. In 2006, Kevin Pritchard and Chad Buchanan hired a intern for the Blazers to start their basketball front office, and that person was Joe Cronin. These are kind of like a guy who was, previously co-signed by the people who brought Cronin into the league. I think you can kind of connect the obvious dots there. My thoughts on Bjorkgren are like, we'll see. I think he's much better suited to have in that assistant role than in the lead role. Certainly from what we know, obviously people change, and we see the tip of the iceberg, and we read maybe the first third of the iceberg. Even the reporting is like there's a lot more to it. Okay. Let's talk Chris Fleming in the third segment, and then I got some broad thoughts on what it means to hire coaches for the Portland Trail Blazers in the summer of 2024. Join me in that third segment, won't you? First, though, I want to tell you that today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. I'm recording this after the Stanley Cup Finals have ended. In fact, I waited because I wanted to watch a little bit of hockey. So I watched a little bit of hockey. I took some show notes. I got prepared for this episode, and as I'm watching the Stanley Cup Finals play out, congratulations to the Florida Panthers, I'm realizing that sports are winding down a little bit. We got the WNBA all summer long, and we got baseball all summer long, and we got FanDuel all summer long. So even if you're an NBA fan or an NHL fan, don't worry, FanDuel's not going anywhere. America's number one sports book is hooking it up for all customers all summer long with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone all day, every day, all summer long. So head on over to FanDuel.com/lockedon to start making the most of your summer. That's including the NBA draft. That's including the WNBA. That's including Major League Baseball all freaking summer long as FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Still a pass first point guard. I'm still Mike Richmond, and you are still listening to Locked On Blazers. Okay, who's Chris Fleming? He's a pro coach who started his career in Germany, spent 14 years coaching in various pro leagues in Germany, and was briefly the head coach of the German national team, a dude who is a seasoned pro coach even before making the move to North American coaching ranks, which he did in 2015-2016 as an assistant coach on Mike Malone's staff with the Denver Nuggets. Then, following that season, the head of the 2016-17 season, Kenny Atkinson brought him over to the Brooklyn Nets, and Fleming was charged with, from my research, with running the offense for the Brooklyn Nets. He was the guy in charge of the offensive coordinator in Brooklyn. I think that's meaningful for the Blazers, right? I think that's meaningful. You get this sort of creative defensive mind in Bjorkgren. You got a guy who's run NBA offenses, like been the head of on NBA offense. Who knows what he'll be with the Blazers, what exactly his role will be, but like someone who brings that kind of thinking, I think that's valuable. Then out of that situation with Atkinson, and obviously it's kind of like this sort of no all-stars success that they had with Karis LeVert and Jared Allen and D'Angelo Russell. And it's like, oh, okay, these guys can hoop. Like Kenny Atkinson could coach, and Kenny Atkinson just got a job today with the Cleveland Cavaliers. But out of that job in 2019, ahead of the 1920 season, Jim Boylan got hired by the Chicago Bulls, and Jim Boylan said, I want a lead assistant, give me Chris Fleming. And Fleming comes over and takes that lead assistant role on Boylan's staff in Chicago. And then that didn't go very well. And Boylan was, he didn't work out as a head coach, still coaching in the league. He's a guy who's seen around the Blazers facility not too long ago, but now back as an assistant coach in the NBA. And it's like, and Boylan lasts a year, gets fired because he wasn't going to be the guy in Chicago. And when the Bulls change over and they go with Billy Donovan, who stays on staff? It's Chris Fleming. He's a holdover. And I think whenever you get a holdover on staff, it's because the organization says this dude can coach. You can make whatever coaching staff you want. It needs to include Chris Fleming because Chris Fleming is valuable, and we brought him over here because he's valuable. We know we found him in Brooklyn and made him a lead assistant, and we appreciate what he does. And he was one of he did not have the lead assistant title with Billy Donovan, but he's one of the top assistants under Donovan, or one of the front of the bench guys with Donovan. He coached the 2021 through the 2020-2021 season up until this last year. And then this summer, like in the last couple weeks, the Bulls had a couple shakeups. Maurice Cheeks left the coaching staff, and then Fleming was not retained. And the Bulls, as they, kind of spiraling in mediocrity as they always are. I've been really mean to the Bulls recently on the show, so why stop here? A franchise in disarray for several decades without direction. They were pretty good with Derrick Rose and Joakim Noah. But a team that's been a little bit wandering in the wilderness, they're shaking things up, and they're not going to fire their head coach, but they're going to shake up the assistant coaches because, again, like as I said at the top of the show, new voices in the building. It's like you get the acumen, but new voices matters. New voices in the building, and so Fleming let go, and now he is hired to be a front of the bench guy for the Blazers. That's Bjorkgren. That's Fleming. So like that's a lot of time on assistant coaches, right? Some of that is the nature of this program. Some of that is like, I think this really matters. I think assistant coaches really matters. And here's the thing. I think assistant coaching is one of the most important, like a coaching staff, like not just the head coach, but the staff on down, like who you have on staff, is probably one of the most important sort of parts of running a team. If you're a longtime listener, shout out to my everydayers, you know that I think like it's a talent league. And I think talent is something like 75%. I think I've probably settled on like 2/3, probably 65% of the equation is like, how good are the players on your roster? But that other third, if you win that other third every night, that's going to equate to a ton of wins. And if you win that other third at the highest levels of basketball, right? If you dominate a third of the game, and when you get to the playoffs, that really matters, right? Like coaching still is a huge chunk of it. It's just like, it's not like, I'm not under the impression that you can coach your way out of lack of talent, but it matters. It's immensely important. And the staff as a whole is immensely important. It's immensely important. The problem is that the public probably sees less than 10% of what assistant coaches do and what head coaches do. Like we just don't know. We don't know the private conversations. We don't know the private text messages. We don't know what goes on in film room and how guys approach it. And we don't know what each player needs, because we can maybe learn from good, incisive reporting. I believe there was a Jason Quick had a term that Chauncey Billups uses in film where it's the I'm trying not to swear is why I'm stuttering a little bit. It's the give a shoot. He shows the give a shoot play, and it's an effort play he shows on film where hey, this guy gave a shoot yesterday, and like, so you kind of get like, maybe you can get from some incisive reporting, like how coaches go about it, but the little stuff, the one-on-ones with players, how they treat this guy likes to get yelled at. He likes to, like, this dude needs to get yelled at to focus. This dude, you cannot yell at him. Like the little soft stuff, like that is like the magic of coaching. That's what having a good staff is. And then how to communicate things. Hey, we want to do this. How do you communicate from concepts? Maybe like, hey, our stats staff, we asked them to look this up. Our analytics department, we asked them to look this up. They say that we are the best when we do this. Well, how do we take this concept that is like mostly analytical to apply it to our actual scheme? And then how do we communicate that without guys crossing their eyes and getting buy-in? We can know like 10% of the iceberg. The other 90% is deep underwater in places that you just never know without being in the building. But I think it's vitally important. I think assistant coaches is like building a really strong coaching staff is just incredibly valuable for an NBA team. I don't know if it's a market inefficiency, because I think teams know it, but the teams with really good assistants, like, with like 7 good coaches on the bench, that's probably a market inefficiency. And that's what the Blazers are chasing. It is a huge, massive unknown variable. If Bjorkgren and Fleming are veteran coaches, dudes who have coached for Fleming, a guy who's been coaching for 25 years, for Bjorkgren, a guy who's been coaching for nearly 2 decades at the professional levels, right? If they come in and bring a new voice and a new creativity and that offensive acumen and the sort of particularly the offensive creativity I think the Blazers staff currently lacks, and they're able to communicate those ideas in a way that guys buy in, you're not going to maybe see a team jump from 22 wins to 40 wins. They're probably not even going to win north of 35. Like, right? Like, it just seems relatively unlikely that they win like a 33rd game next season. But you're building you're building the foundation and the direction. I think the most important thing for the Blazers over the next season is playing with purpose. What do they want to do? Does it seem clear that they are playing the way they want to and playing with intention and playing a way that maximizes who they got? Here are our guys. Here's how we want to play. Let's take our players and build the best scheme we can, because you have to go in that direction, from players to scheme, not scheme to players. You got to fit it around your talent. Can they fit around their talent? Can veteran coaches figure out who the Blazers have and how to maximize what they do, and then be creative in that maximization? That's the test. And it's hard to know, but we kind of get to see it play out. It's just hard to know in real time. How will it work? And even when we know the guys' resumes, what is it even like? What does it actually translate to? But I think it's fascinating stuff. Okay, tomorrow's show that I'm literally moments away from recording is going to be all about NBA rumors. This show is going to be in your feeds late on a Monday evening, and then Tuesday's show will be back kind of shortly thereafter, and we'll be back on track for 5 shows this week. Tell your friends about the program. It's NBA Draft Week, and tomorrow's show we're talking NBA Draft. So that's what we're focusing on. Come back and listen to that one. I appreciate you listening. I'll talk to you soon.